Hi, this is Brennan Davis, and I'm here with Joel and Adam, and we're going to be talking about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. This is a film made in the year 2000, directed by Ang Lee. It's basically about a young Chinese warrior who steals a sword from a famed swordsman and then escapes into a world of romantic adventure with a mysterious man in the frontier of the nation. Now, that's the IMDb breakdown, as we always do. And I should mention before we even start that this is part of our Cheng Pei Pei celebration. She passed away recently, and this is the third and final episode where we're going to be talking about our movies that we thought Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would be a good film to end with. That IMDb breakdown, I don't know about that. That's a little bit, it does get it, but it also is a little bit misleading because um, I don't know. It makes it sound like she's off on an adventure with a man, and that's not really the story.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, not only is that
but
not the story, that's not even that's one of like three main
yeah,
threads, and it's not exactly correctly characterized either. So
yeah.
it's
Well,
like,
actually, which mysterious man are they talking about too? Are they talking about what's his name, Black Cloud or Dark Cloud, or are they talking about Li Mubai? So, the it's a little
well,
unclear.
I would struggle to write a
I would,
concise introduction to this movie, so
oh,
I guess I
same
can't
here.
blame
But
them.
yeah, characterizing her as a warrior too is weird. It's like she is a trained fighter, but I just feel like
You know
warrior is
why
a weird term to describe her.
they use warrior in the subtitles? Because she says you're a warrior from Udang, right? At one point, and I think that might be why. I also feel like
Could be.
warrior had more currency in English around that time. It was in the Kill Bill movies. It was like now it's kind of avoided as a word. I feel like for movies,
Huh.
unless you're talking about like a Viking, you generally don't use warrior these days.
Yeah,
Right?
well, I mean, warrior's like a kind of a profession more than anything. Like
Yeah.
if you fight for a living, you're a warrior, and it's like I don't
Right.
know.
It
It's
might be
not
more
worth
accurate to call her a swordsman. It's hard to find a good
Swords,
English
yeah,
one that,
Yeah.
that really.
swordswoman, swordsman, or whatever. That
She's
that
also
would
a
work.
flying kung fu genius who has like secret martial arts that she learned. So like
Yeah.
is there an English term for that? Not really.
Well, I
She's a
mean,
hidden, she's a
Wuxia.
hidden dragon.
She's
It's right
a
in the title.
she's a martial hero, but the
Right. And so there's a kind of an equivalent, but like, and I'm sure there is an actual Chinese term that I mean like so, but in what would you call it? She's not a knight. She's a noble
yeah.
person that isn't supposed to be a fighter, but is a fighter because she knows secret, magical fighting styles and has a
Hidden
magic sword.
dragon.
Well, I mean, and also they did use for a while they were using the translation like knight errant and things like that, which I always found confusing because
That's
as soon as you
Knight
say
errant
knight,
is not a good
yeah,
term for it at all.
it's really
Yeah,
there's no
I've
they're
seen
trying
that.
to well they're hitting the same problem we are. They're struggling to find a cultural equivalent of someone
yeah.
going to the Shanghu, and there really isn't one.
I mean, you could say heroic swordsman, wandering. I like wandering hero or martial
Wandering
hero.
hero or
Yeah,
wandering swordsman is
yeah.
probably the
And I
best
also
one.
you could just say martial artist. Like I never understood why that
Yeah,
wasn't
martial
the
artist
term
is.
that people
But think
used.
think about Jiang Hu too, is as it is anyone who practices martial arts, regardless of
Yeah,
their station or their job, is part
yeah,
of the Jiang Hu. It's tough to nail down what a person is. Like
yeah.
say martial artist works because that is the only connecting trait between everyone in Jiang Hu. They
Yeah,
all
I
know
mean,
what.
there's so little English terms for them. I literally named that job in my game about people that have that job after the game itself. So Lone Wolf
Uh,
Fist is what it's called in the game. It's just
Okay.
not an
Okay, I
English
get you.
term for it. The original term was mystical martial artist, which is as close as I could get to an approximation of what you do.
What-
You're not only a martial artist, you kind of have magic too. You're a fist wizard. Oh, I
So
should have done fist wizard. Damn it. Missed
no.
opportunities.
So what did you? I mean, we should probably give our overall impression of the movie, like, or before we lead into actual discussion of it.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. So I don't know, Adam. Why don't you start if you're comfortable doing so?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, basically, this is actually the second time I've ever watched this movie. The first time was back when it came out in 2000. I saw it in the theater. At the time, the only Hong Kong type cinema I'd seen was just the John Woo modern day type action films and so on. So I was utterly ignorant of anything to do with the wuxia genre. And I liked the movie, but I didn't love it. I was like, oh, that was cool. And I kind of went on my way, never thought about it again. And it's like going back now, since then I've done the Wuxia Weekend podcast with
Uh-huh.
Brendan. I've watched over 100 Wuxia movies since then. And watching it again, I was like, oh, this is so much better of a movie than I remembered it being, because I really got it this time. I'd say
Okay.
that is an interesting thing about this movie. It was the introduction of the genre to a lot of Americans, but at the same time, I feel like this really isn't. This is more. I mean, it's more like, it's kind of like watching Unforgiven as your first Western to an extent. It's like this is almost kind of a commentary on wuxia to an extent. It's kind of an, I would say expert level, but it's an experienced level wuxia movie to truly appreciate it. So I was really impressed with this movie watching it this time.
Yeah, I saw it in the theater with my uncle when it came over here. So like in 2000. And I mean, I had seen movies like this before. I definitely like martial arts movies were, ubiquitous in the lead up to this. But this is, like you were saying, this is kind of the point when I think like people became very conscious of wuxia as a
Yeah.
genre. Like even because before that, like again, that wasn't the term that people even used to describe wuxia movies over here. Back then, that we would confuse them with kung fu movies most of the time, or you
Yeah.
might say like the Flying Swordsman movie, or some variation of they're in the air and they're using swords a lot. Like that was sort of the big thing, and they're very stylized. Like the kung fu movies were generally a little more grounded. But even then, the line was not something that I think people really got until this movie. For me, the big thing that this movie did for me was, number one, it was a fond memory I had of seeing a film with my uncle, but I remember it impacting me in that the fluidity of the movements in this movie. Especially, there's a scene where Li Mu Bai is doing a sword form. I don't know if you guys remember that when
Yeah.
he gets the Green Destiny back. That scene, something about that's what got me to be like, okay, I want to do martial arts now.
Uh-huh.
And so that really is what sent me like. So I know, like my co-writer Jeremy, we talked briefly about this in another podcast where he said that was the thing that got him to learn how to read and write Chinese and start doing translations.
Huh.
And he went down the rabbit hole of, I want to read the book this is based on. In order to do that, I have to learn Chinese. And my reaction was more like, I want to do what that guy is doing on screen.
Yeah.
I ended up going down a much different path. I never learned how to use a sword,
Never
but
became a wandering hero.
never became a wandering hero. No, never, sadly, um, but it did have a very big impact on me. And the funny thing is, in the years since it came out, even though it had this massive impact on everybody, right? And even though it was like this, its response, like I think before the podcast, you or Joel were saying, we probably wouldn't have gotten a movie like Hero over here or House of Flying Daggers over here
No.
if this movie hadn't come out, because this was the thing that really made it clear that like wuxia could do mainstream success in the United States.
Yeah.
For all of that, people that get into the genre for a while, I think less so now, but back when I was sort of, in like doing martial arts a lot and stuff like that and watching a lot of these movies, people kind of shit on it a little bit. You know what I mean? There was kind of a sneering that happened with this movie.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that I can remember the discussion around it, and everyone watching it, when you'd hear discussion in the media and so on, they were concentrating purely on the action scenes and the wire fu and that kind of thing. And because I feel like the deeper themes of this movie, unless you've gotten into the genre and have that in your headspace already, it's a little harder to dig into what this movie is doing. So I feel like a lot of people like this movie, but it was more the action elements of it that were drawing people, which is fine, which is good. I mean, it got people in the door. But
what I mean is, among wuxia fans, there was kind of
yeah.
It's sort of like, well, that's like preschool wuxia. Do you know what I mean? That was kind of like the attitude that some people had about it.
I can put that on myself, because as someone that got into wuxia whenever I started doing wuxia weekend with you, I was just going from my memories of this movie of liking it okay, but not loving it. But once I got into watching Wuxia Weekend with you, I came to really love the genre. And I was comparing my love of the genre with that movie was decent memories of
Yeah.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So I've been thinking of it as like, yeah, I guess that was an okay mainstream wuxia movie, but now I've actually gone back and watched it. Like, oh no, this is fantastic.
Well,
So
and
yeah,
I adopted it. I mean, it was something, I think it was in the water because I remember also sort of, having that kind of an attitude. And again, I saw it. I think the last time I saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was probably around 2010. I might have seen it one other times between then and now, but I haven't seen it a lot since it came out in the theater. I saw it in the theater. I got it on DVD and saw it a few times. Then I remember popping it back in around 2010. And I think something that I didn't really realize until this viewing was just how incredible the execution of the whole movie was.
yeah.
So it's kind of like, I do understand some of the criticism because the thing that people used to always say is, well, because it's an homage, it's like, well, we've seen it all before. But the thing that again, I feel like I've seen most of the wuxia movies that are out there.
Most wuxia movies are made of parts from other movies.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
But another thing here, there's almost an entire other movie implied to predate this movie, maybe even more than one movie.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a movie about this guy, like Li Mubai's master. Then there's also a movie about Li Mubai's quest for revenge where his friend dies and he falls in love.
It's the middle of the series.
And then this is like the third movie, and then there's another movie after this implied.
Yeah.
So that feeling is really strong with this, and that's a very wuxia feeling for a movie.
Yeah.
20-year backstory to take precedence.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. But that's what I was going to get at. As I was going to say, is like it does have everything in it because it's an homage. But I feel like even going back on all the movies I've seen in wuxia, one thing I can say genuinely after this viewing is I don't think I've seen it done in this way is the difference. Do you know what I mean? Ang Lee has a particular point of view that you don't often see in wuxia movies.
This movie, this is important too. This is a good wuxia movie. It's solid, but it also has something to say for itself in the pantheon of great wuxia movies.
Yeah.
Like I could kind of recommend this in the same breath as Come Drink With Me because even though I don't think it's quite as good as Come Drink With Me, it still is so unique and it's still very clearly like unambiguously a wuxia movie. So I think that's important about this film.
It's in the same area of like a touch of Zen, I think, to an extent. It's especially like the ending gave me a very touch of Zen kind of feeling to it, where it is. Yeah,
well,
I don't want to say it's arty because that makes it sound pretentious.
It is kind of arty. It is kind of arty. I think
it is.
Well, no, I mean, Ang Lee, he's from Taiwan, isn't he? And I think like King Hu, he filmed a lot of those movies in Taiwan. And Taiwan, I'm not an expert on Taiwanese cinema by any stretch, but I feel like when I see Taiwanese martial arts movies, they often have more of that feel than say like a mainland. Yeah. So I mean, it also, in some ways, it also just reminded me of the kinds of dramas we had in the 90s, which was something I was struck with this time. It's a martial arts, like this was my thought when I saw it last week, and I had more thoughts when I saw it again this week. It's a martial arts wuxia movie, but it's shot like a drama. Do you mean that? I think that's the big thing that's different about it.
I'm taking it to Ang Lee. I mean, Remains of the Day was Ang Lee, if I recall, and that was like early '90s drama that really set the tone for a lot of '90s drama films. So it's not surprising at all, as he was just a huge figure in that genre.
Yeah, no, and So, Joel, by the way, I'm getting a little bit of background noise on your end. I
just muted my mic. Are you still getting background noise?
No, now I'm not. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was a fluke.
There was a truck that went by. I muted it.
It was so powerful it overcame the mute effect of your microphone. But so I don't know. The one thing I wanted to talk about this time was the love triangle, because I usually ignore that aspect of this movie. Like you said, you tend to focus more on the fighting and the drama, but I was paying more attention to the love story this time, and I was just curious if you guys had any thoughts on the various love stories that you see in the movie.
The various love stories. Well, one of the things that's interesting about this thing is that almost every, like, there's kind of three generations that are really relevant in this movie. Like I think it's really easy to see the first two because we see the main character is the youngest generation, and Li Mubai is like this older generation. But there's another one right above that, which is their masters, which has what was her name? Jade Fox. I forgot the name.
Yeah,
of the
Jade Fox.
Jade Fox.
Yeah, Jade Fox, and like she's the previous generation, and each one of them has this horrible struggle with like falling in love and martial arts mixing, and it just not working at all. You know, because like she's a jilted lover. You know, like that's the primary villain of this film has a broken relationship with love and martial arts, and the second generation is the same thing.
That's an
They mix
interesting
love and
point.
martial arts.
I want to
The
focus
last-
on that. Let's focus on that before we get into that. Because
Isn't that great?
Well, no, because I hadn't thought of it that way, because we're kind of getting almost Liu Mubai's perspective on that.
We are.
Even though she does give her point of view, it's done
the
with
movies-
it's done, I think, through his eyes almost. Like we're
It is.
seeing.
Well, we see her as a villain, but when you actually watch the film and you watch her facial expressions, she's terrified, overwhelmed, and unfairly treated by everyone in this film.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So she's a
yeah.
villain,
It's a-
but she's also extremely sympathetic.
Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
even
agree.
this time around, my view of it was, oh, she snuck into Wudong and slept with the master to steal his secrets. And I never thought, it never occurred to me that what Joel is saying was
The words he uses are so telling. I was good enough for his bed, but not to be his student.
Yeah.
Right? That's really facing true prejudice, which is unfair because she was clearly a gifted martial artist who would have been fantastic. She could have done what her student did if she'd been given an actual chance. And Li Mubai is like a heroic figure because he's trying to rectify that wrong, but he can't quite.
yeah.
She
Well,
gets
he's
cheated
blinded
on
too,
both
isn't
sides.
he?
I mean, having her master and her apprentice both
Yeah,
hide
betray her.
secrets from her is rough.
And it's the same secrets.
And also
Yeah.
that I think just to bring us back to Cheng Pei Pei, I think this ties to her personal history as a movie star. And again, I could be unclear, so just take what I'm saying as this is what Brendan has picked up reading about her, over the years. I'm not an expert, but my memory is that she had this this ascension at Shaw Brothers, and then the kung fu craze hits, and suddenly female martial heroes aren't as important as they were. And so you see it like the movie Jade Swallow, like her own sequel, she gets relegated to the to almost a side character, and Jimmy Wang Yu becomes like the main
You said
character.
Jay Swallow instead of Golden Swallow.
Oh, sorry, Gold. That's
Because
my
it's
fault.
Silver Rock. It's the Silver Rock.
No, the
movie, and I've
reason why
complained about
I
that
have
very
I have a Golden Swallow character in my game, and I call her Jade Swallow. It's in one of my current games.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good, Brendan.
so-
Damn it.
But
Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry, Golden Swallow. But in the sequel to Golden Swallow, the
The sequel, which is called Golden Swallow, is not about Golden Swallow at all. She's barely in the movie because
And it's
Silver
a-
Rock's in the goddamn.
and it's a good movie, but like we've discussed, she becomes a side character, and
Well,
Jimmy
I
Wang
think-
becomes the main character.
Yeah.
And you can
I
see
think it's-
that. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, you can see, I feel almost like she's using that in those scenes where she talks about it, because Wu Dang in a lot of movies doesn't exclude women. Like I believe in Wu Dang is in The Bride with White Hair, and I'm pretty sure they have women disciples. So it must be,
Yeah.
this particular iteration of Wu Dang. So that's kind of a choice they're making when they made the movie to emphasize that. And so I feel like, again, it might be part of the source material as well, but it's still a choice to go with that source material. So it feels like they're connecting it to the actress. I feel like Ang Lee was definitely, trying to pay tribute to her. Okay, so we had a technical interruption. And what I was saying is I thought that Ang Lee was paying tribute to Cheng Pei Pei by putting her in the Jade Fox role in that way. That was, I don't know at what point you guys lost me. So if I need to go back further, let me know.
We heard you. I think you realized when you froze. I don't think we missed anything. But,
Okay.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I forgot why we were reviewing this, and I forgot Cheng Pei Pei was in it. And it was like when she shows up in the first scene, it was like, because she looks, she's older in this.
Yeah,
it took me like 20 seconds, and I'm like, oh, that's Cheng Pei Pei. I was like so excited. But I think an interesting thing about her character too is she didn't want any of this trouble to happen. She was perfectly happy training her student, keeping her head down. She was upset about her student stealing the sword. She abused her. It's like you caused all of this. It's like I feel like whether she was a bad character or not, I felt like to an extent she kind of moved beyond that to an extent, and then this all pulled her back into this horrible situation. But it's I don't know. But go on. What were you gonna say?
I mean, that was the extent of what I was saying. I believe we were basically talking about. I think we had started talking about the love triangle, but then we shifted to this topic because Joel made the point about how, she's a jilted lover, and that's her. That's like really the core of her character. And I was just saying how even to this point in time, I still saw her the way that the movie was kind of presenting her to you as sort
right,
of
as sort of seductress who was using that, right? But I don't think that's the case. I think there was something a little more honest about her relationship with the master, at least on a romantic level. It is 3 generations of doomed, impossible romances, and I like that you keep calling it a love triangle. It's not.
No, it is.
By the time we get to it, the third guy is dead and has been dead for years. So there's no triangle left, but there's still kind of a triangle because they're acting like he's still there and his memory is something they can't desecrate by, consummating their union.
That's why I wanted to talk about love, because, and I hadn't really, I'd heard this from people before, but I sort of dismissed it as just sort of, oh no, that's not what the movie is. But this time around, the past 2 times, I really started to notice. I think that, and again, I think what's her name in the movie? They call her Jen in the English translation, and I think they call her Zhao Long, which means dragon in.
Hell yeah.
But I think that she is in love with Li Mubai, or he's in love with her. But there is definitely it's.
I don't think so, man. I don't get that at all out of
Watch it again.
I thought she was. There's definitely moments. I mean, it's a moment near the end when she's drugged too. She definitely it comes out more too. But there's she's conflicted definitely because she's a very complicated character. There's a very one thing that's interesting about Jen. I guess we'll go with Jen. Is she seems to she doesn't know what she wants to an extent. It's like okay, well she doesn't want the life of being a wife and marrying this guy and raising her family's profile. She doesn't want that. Then she goes out partway through the movie and enters the Django as the Django hero and gets to that big fight. But afterwards, she goes back and is, she doesn't seem happy with that either. And she's not, it's like, she's just a very unsatisfied person overall. Yeah. And I forget where I was leading with this.
No, that's okay. Well, I'll pick it up.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Well, I feel like, so something that I noticed was what's his name? Dark Cloud. When she first meets him, he's this towering, bandit who is just very impressive on first meeting. But when he sneaks into a room later, after all that happens, he's got this giant hat on. He looks like a little boy. And it's like his whole personality almost changed. It's obviously the acting and the costuming, but like you're seeing him through her eyes. And what I realized is, she can't love a guy like Dark Cloud anymore, because just like she's eclipsed Jade Fox, she's eclipsed Dark Cloud. Yeah. But Li Mubai is somebody who would be worthy of her affection at this point. Just like she's sort of struggling to find a worthy master and a worthy opponent, I think she's also struggling to find a worthy object of her affection. And I agree with Joel. It's not like, again, there is the scene that Adam mentioned where she's drugged and it's a little bit more clear. But there's a lot of scenes where a lot of the acting in this movie is done in the eyes, I think. Yeah. I think it's very subtle.
Yeah, that's true.
And I feel like there are a lot of moments where I'm like, oh, wait, I think she's looking at him like a lover now, or like she's interested in him. And there's also a scene where Li Mubai, after he has an encounter with her when she tries to bring the sword back or whatever, he's talking to Shu Lien. And he says, I saw Jen last night, which is what you would say if you saw, it's not, and again, it's an English translation, so maybe in the Mandarin that's not the innuendo, but in English it comes
No,
across as,
her reaction, Michelle
Yeah.
Yeoh's face, when they go to
Yeah.
her face after he says that, and there's kind of this moment of her like, oh, what's going on here?
And then she goes into a panic because and again, it's all very subtle, but she's like, look, like, this isn't any of our problem. Like, this is like,
Yes.
everything's just going to be fine. Just forget about it. Like, you can tell there's desperation on her side. And so I feel like there is and again, I would agree with Joel in that it's not like it comes out and they're smooching or there's no, there's not clarity on it. I don't think that you can say definitively this is the case.
I will say there is ambiguity that allows for that interpretation. I will flex that far, but here's where I object to it. I want to make sure I'm making this objection here. I don't object because that ambiguity doesn't exist. I object because I feel that if you read it that way, it powerfully eclipses the master-student relationship that I think is Li Mubai's actual desire.
I think that's his
the question.
desire. That's his desire, just because I think she definitely has some attraction to him, and he may or may not have attraction. I don't believe Li Mubai would act on it. I feel like he like, even if he is, I feel like it's something he would not go with based on what we see about him. But
the love story, it also. Okay, I'll grant you that. I'm really thinking of Li Mubai as the central character in terms of that relationship, but I'm also thinking about his last words to the woman he's pined for years, where he gives up spiritual enlightenment to be a ghost by her side forever. Like, that's not something you say to someone if you have conflicting feelings about who you're attracted to.
Yeah, but people are complicated. I mean, it's possible for him to truly be in love with someone, but also it's like, oh, she's attractive. It's like I feel like his love really lies with Michelle Yeoh, but I mean, I'm not even sure that he is in love with Jen. But,
I feel like if you interpret the ambiguity of when he looks at her with longing, which he unambiguously does, as romantic longing instead of a longing to have a student, you're eclipsing or clouding the sort of purity of Li Mubai's motivation. And I just don't think that suits his character. I think he really is truly chivalrous. And I think that's really important. Like the clouding he has in his chivalry is twofold. One, he's not supposed to be in love with the person he's in love with. That's clouding his monkness, right? And two, his hate and pain for the loss of his master is clouding his judgment of Jade Fox. I think adding anything more to that is just muddying the waters. I feel like those two are unambiguously clear in the movie, and you can interpret all ambiguity along those two axes, and you get a completely satisfactory character with Li Mubai. And I don't think that gives us enough. I don't think there's enough wiggle there to also introduce this love triangle that Brendan's talking about. I just don't read that in the movie.
A love triangle doesn't need to be two ways, though. It could be a love triangle just because she is attracted to him. I feel that's enough. I mean, love triangles, by their definition, often have unrequited lines,
elements.
I also think this is a movie that can be. Oh, can you guys see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, sorry. I had a weird glitch, and with granted what happened, I wanted to double check.
See us soon in part 3.
Kidding. I think this is a movie that can be. I think it's an ambiguous movie in a lot of levels, so I think it can be read in multiple ways. I think that the reading that Joel is giving, which is the reading I would have given you 2 weeks ago, I think that is the standard. That's the standard read. I think that's that's how you probably ought to read the movie. But I think the more you watch it, the more you start to wonder about some of those elements. And so there's a couple of things. One, some of this might just be through Jen's perspective. Maybe what we're getting is she views Wudang as a whorehouse. She thinks she's only heard Jade Fox's account of what goes on there. So it's her slowly coming to understand, oh no, Li Mubai is not, lusting after me or whatever. And
that's a good point.
Yeah. The other approach is Li Mubai is a somewhat naive character when it comes to love. And so just like he doesn't necessarily understand his own feelings for Shu Lien, he might not understand where things could go if he takes this beautiful young disciple, and Shu Lien can see that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so I think there's that element too.
Well, she clearly has a motive for interpreting it in that way, though. She's romantically protective of Li Mubai, despite the fact they don't have anything official going on, because they are flirting every time they talk through this whole movie, from the first line to the last. So it's there, even if they're not gonna grow up and acknowledge it. And Li Mu Bai is a total square, so like, of course he doesn't. But like,
we got to talk about that too. One thing I also want to say is, thing I noticed this time is Julianne does not like Jen from beginning to end. There's like when Julianne says you were never really my friend, or you were never really I don't think she's lying. I think that Julianne had a hostility towards her from the very beginning.
Let me agree with you a little bit on the love triangle thing. I think even if there's not a triangle in Li Mu Bai, I think that, or even on either of their part, I do think that Julianne looks at it and sees that, because if Li Mu Bai takes this young, beautiful student, he's going to be a chivalrous square, because that's who he is, right? I agree with Adam's reading there. And of course, he's a square. We all know this. But it's also going to be, this is who he's going to be spending time with, not
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it's not,
it doesn't need to be romantic to be jealous. I mean, it's
right.
When you're in a relationship with someone and you're spending a lot of time with someone who's even a friend, it can be.
Well, imagine this was a movie about a master piano player, and he's got someone who he's been pining for a long time, and there's a young, beautiful student who's clearly talented in piano playing, and he wants to take her on as a student, where he'll spend 8 hours to 10 hours every day for the next 5 to 10 years with her.
Yeah.
I sort of see where you're going with this, Brendan. Yeah. I don't know that that's a triangle. This is some kind of fucked up trapezoid thing. But okay, I'll give you that much.
I'll go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
I was going to say, on the Julianne thing, it is interesting that really what kind of sets a lot of this stuff in motion. You're talking about the relationship between Jen and Julianne, but it's like Julianne going, "Hey, check out this super powerful sword," is and showing it to her is really what's if she had just done her security job and not look at this wonderful treasure that's here, let me show it off. None of this would have happened.
Whoever got this magical sword that breaks down all social barriers would certainly be able to realize their impossible dreams. Well, better put it away in this easily stealable location.
Well, every character kind of spells their own doom in a way. Like Li Mu Bai deciding to think about it. Li Mu Bai deciding to leave the martial world and put aside his sword. That's what sets everything off at the very beginning. And you're right about that as well. But what I'm saying is every character kind of gives the sword to their enemy in a way. Do you know what I mean? They kind of, so, but the other aspect of it that I find interesting is this all begins with him having a really bad meditation experience where he was, again, it's in translation, he's Wu Dang. I think they're supposed to be Taoists, but I think they have Buddhist roots. So I don't know exactly what type of enlightenment he's trying to achieve here.
That sounds like a very Buddhist enlightenment.
It did to me too. But I'm just aware that we're getting it through translation, so I don't know what they were talking about. But he was trying to achieve enlightenment of some kind, and he instead had this experience of despair and emptiness because he's attached to Julianne, which he doesn't know at that moment necessarily. Yeah, that's the thing. So it begins with this failed attempt to become enlightened, where he realizes he still has this attachment to her, and then it's like he doesn't quite know what to do with that throughout the movie. And there's this scene where they're off searching for Jen, and they're in this cottage in the woods together, and he has this line where he finally touches her hand and holds it, and they're just sitting there holding hands, and he says, "I want to be with you just like this. It gives me peace." And then the camera pans back, and it just shows them just sort of sitting there, and he's kind of looking serene and peaceful, and she looks like she wants the passion of Li Mu Bai, not the not the peaceful, the serenity.
I love your interpretation that everyone is looking at Li Mu Bai, who is this absolute Charlie Brown of a character, as this fiery sex tiger, and he's like, I just want to kick the ball.
No, but that's it. I'm not saying that she's looking at him as this fiery character, but we're saying she wants his passion. And he doesn't even, that's why I'm saying he's naive. He doesn't even know how to be in love with somebody, right?
It's the Charlie Brown comment,
it's curious too, because it's obviously something is pulling him back from his enlightenment. And I feel like he's not even sure, is it Julianne or is it is it also the fact he's got that unfulfilled vengeance thing? It's like his part, like I feel like part of the part of him that wants to that is unwilling to admit his love wants to say, oh well, I've got to finish my revenge. That's why I can't move on till that's done. When it's obviously, I think it really is the love attachment, but he's muddying it in his own mind there to an extent.
Well, and he has to die to get both, right? Like he gets his violent revenge, but in doing so, he is distracted enough that he gets the dart in the neck and he's poisoned, and he's dying in the arms of the woman he loves before he can bring himself to say, "No, man, I choose you over enlightenment." Yeah. You know, he has to die to get both of them. It's so destructive, the things he wants, and he never even gets his student. You know,
No,
the best
the reason
he does is send her off to be a student.
And the reason that he's so serene in that scene where they're holding hands is because he still kind of wants to be a monk. He wants to have her, but he wants it to be in this like enlightened mode of being, not in, you know.
Or like maybe just admitting the truth to himself was what he needed to be peaceful. You know, like why be a monk? Because clearly his master wasn't a monk. His master liked whores. You know, his master partied.
And again, I'm very unclear on the precise details of how Wudang is operating in this world, but yeah, because obviously I think the thing that was holding him back was not that he was a member of Wudang, right? It's that his sworn brother was Shu Lien's like betrothed or something, right? So so that still shouldn't have even been holding him back.
In the implied prequel, which I pray to God never gets made because it would ruin everything.
Well, as far as I know, the books haven't been translated in English. You can go get the synopses.
I'm going to pull a Hitchcock and acquire and destroy every copy of those books so this movie can remain pristine.
But
it's only loosely based on the books anyway, so I think whatever you pulled out of them would be, you know, iffy on connecting it to this movie.
I'm merely going to pull out their existence by destroying all of them. It'll be fine.
So I guess, so, you know, as we're kind of getting both. No, we should probably move on to fight choreography just because we're a little bit pressed for time.
The second this goes into book burning territory, you're like, we should probably change the subject. This is less about my love of destroying literature and history and more about my hatred of prequels. But please,
if it makes you feel better, the author was suppressed by the Chinese government for writing this kind of stuff. So don't worry, the book burning's probably already happened.
Thanks again, Communist Party of China. All right, moving on.
So back to the fight choreography. You were talking before the podcast about how fluid and you know, I forget what. Ethereal was the word you used, right?
Yeah, ethereal. That sounds like a fairy word I would use. Yeah.
But I mean that is true. The movie this is fight choreography we've seen. I think it was Yuan Wu-ping who did the fight choreography, and you can definitely see that. But it's shot in a way that's, you know, I always compare this movie, and this probably doesn't sound like a compliment, but it is meant to be one, to a fish tank, where it's like watching fish move through water. Do you know what I mean? It's
just very well. And another thing that you were talking about, Li Mu Bai swordsmanship. That's a version of Tai Chi Chuan. It's the Tai Chi Chuan, I think it's called. It's the sword fighting style of Tai Chi Chuan. I recognize some of those forms, and that's very often likened to swimming through air. The way those movements work.
Yeah, because Wudang is
poise and grace, and it's less about like speed or strength.
Yeah, Wudang is, I think, supposed to be Tai Chi. But the sequence that I love, which I posted a clip of on Twitter the other night, is the one where Shu Lien and Jen are squaring off in the in her escort company facility that she has. That scene is maybe the best fight scene in the whole movie. There's a lot of contenders, so I don't think that you can really say one more than the other. But
I did watch it twice.
Yeah. Well, I
got to rewind that.
Well, what I liked about that scene, number one, I like that they do the legendary weapons of China thing, where it's like, we're just going to show you all the different weapons because we have this like
the tip of my brain when I was watching that film.
Yeah, and and it's done in a clever way because they have this sword that can just demolish all the other weapons. So it's just sort of cut. And then, but then in the end, the way that Shulien wins is she realizes that she can just penetrate Jen's defenses when the blade cuts her sword.
So
She
good.
just, that was a really brilliant final moment in the sequence. But yeah, I just like you see the hook swords.
They even have that comedic moment where she gets that gigantic halberd. It tips her back. It's
I
too
think
heavy.
that's a monk. It looked like it was a monk spade or something. I'm not sure what it was supposed
Is
to
it
be.
a judge's brush? What is that damn thing? Anyway, it was a halberd. I don't care. You know.
But
it was just funny. I love that they put a little comedy beat in there. They didn't.
There were
have
a couple. There were two scenes like that. There was one like that, and then there was Bo, Master Bo. I don't know exactly what happened. Maybe Jade Fox stuck behind him and dug his clawed chain thing into a tree. But
that was funny.
But yeah, he runs up and he gets
He does
yanked
that
on
like
his
Three
own chain.
Stooges yank.
Yeah.
He's like, whoop, 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 whoop. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Doesn't he go?
Yeah.
He gets through the whole movie, doesn't he? Doesn't Bo get through the whole damn?
I was telling
Way
you
to
guys
go,
last
Bo.
night that the one happy ending in this movie is him and the daughter of Inspector, what's his name, Inspector Ty or something. The
That's right. They
yeah,
hook
Inspector
up, don't
Ty.
they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she invites him into her abode when he's standing watch, and it's very clear that it's for more than just keeping.
I
guard.
was paying a lot of attention to Bo in this movie. I was
Yeah.
like, this guy is the glue that holds this whole
Yeah.
thing together. I love Bo.
Yeah, he is the glue. I agree. He actually has a lot of important connective scenes to the rest of the movie. His whole investigation.
Everyone knows him. He's
Yeah.
so important to like everyone in this movie, and he's just some dude.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. No, the fight scene with Jade Fox, the first one she's in, where the policeman dies and everything. I love the fact, like early in the scene when Jade Fox is doing pretty well, it's like Chang Pei just pulls out that twinkle in her eye kind of feeling from her movies, where it's like, and the way it changes over the course of the movie into this kind of desperation and fear. It was like, that is such good acting within a fight.
Yeah.
That is
It's
so
good.
That just showed the brilliance of Chang Pei.
Even like just how that scene is structured, where she comes out as like a hunched old granny, she's sort of like, she's like devil grandma almost, and she's just kind of coming across the screen, and then by the end she's like, her hair is down and she's this ferocious like demoness.
So good.
What I
That's
like
amazing.
about that scene, there's a scene where I think she's got like a staff and she has a sword in it, right? Is that her weapon in that scene? And she like pulls a sword out of something, and she does that spin where she pulls it out and she stabs behind her, and it's clearly an homage to Lady Hermit, where she does where she stabs the guy who's standing right behind her. There's a lot of callbacks to various other Chang Pei movies. We were talking when we did Dragon Swamp about how the Green Destiny itself is kind of like a callback to the sword in Dragon Swamp. But yeah, I thought that scene was really well done. And that scene also, that's what the scene where things are getting real because somebody dies in that scene. So
yes. Yeah. That's a fantastic fight scene.
In one fight scene, the range she shows off, the emotional range that you're talking about, is incredible. Like, it is incredible. And you're right, that twinkle in her eyes, that's such an iconic move from her, right?
Yeah, that's what going back to this movie being different when you know wuxia, and you can't really appreciate it unless you do. It's like having seen a bunch of Chang Pei movies, I never would have appreciated. I mean, it's a great performance either way, but it's like, man, it's just,
knowing the history gives it
so much better.
Oh, it does.
So much.
It's so rich. So yeah. It's weird to kind of come back to this movie, honestly, because this was like my first wuxia movie too. Because I'd seen Bruce Lee movies before this, but I saw this one like you, Adam, in the theater. But I was younger than you because I'm a baby. I'm the baby of this group.
Yeah, you must have been like a teenager when you saw this.
I was very young because it was 2000, right? I was 13, 14 years old. I was a little kid, right? I was a little baby Joel in my diapers. So I saw this movie with my brother and my mom, and this was like her first ever undubbed kung fu movie, and it really it was a barrier that we went through as a family, where like on the one side of it we kind of just regarded these as more or less just action films, and then on the other side of it we were like, well, that was really interesting, we got to get more of that. You know, it
Yeah.
really opened the doors for us. And I think
Yeah.
our experience wasn't a unique one. You know, I can talk to my mom about this movie and then launch that into a conversation about wuxia, which is a very alien country to my mom. And kind of, it's a connective tissue where I can be like, oh, this and oh, that. And I think this was a great film to choose for Chang Pei in particular because she's in so many great wuxia films that I can now sort of rope my mom into watching with me. Oh, you like
Yeah.
Jade Fox, did you, Mom? Well, guess what?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that she had this one line in it where she says, "Believe me, I have a lesson or two to teach you still." I forget the exact, and it was so ominous. And you know, that I don't know. I really like her. She kind of starts out almost as this matronly type figure, and then she she just transforms by the end of the movie into
She's pretty villainous.
yeah,
Like,
she's terrifying.
when you
Yeah,
use
well,
poison, that shit is a signal that you're a real rat bastard.
Well, she's
You
got
know?
no regard for anybody. She's just like, we'll kill whoever stands in her way. Like she's like, she just wants to go and live in the wilderness with Jen and mow people down. And she doesn't care about Jen's family. She doesn't care about any of the, any of the rules
Well,
of society.
she almost inherently regards relationships as dangerous, terrible things. And you could see why. Like, that's a justified attitude for her. But, like, that doesn't mean it's redeemable. It's monstrous the way this woman acts.
Yeah, of the movies I've seen of hers, it's like the most likely early character of hers that could lead into this character is the Jade Raksha. If she hadn't had that experience of kind of retiring at the end of the movie, if she'd never encountered the guy in that,
there's another one too. The character That Fiery Girl has a slightly dark. That one's all because she's, if I remember, she's part of an evil sect in that one. She still ends up being good, but she's definitely got a little bit more of an edge to her in that movie. And Jade Raksha is another one too. I would say even Lady Hermit is got potential because she's like so righteous she could almost veer into villainous, you know.
You have to be really self-righteous to turn really bitter.
Yeah. But Jade Fox is just so like has such contempt for everyone and everything is I think the thing that
they made poison such a central part of her personhood.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just a tool she used, she was the poison, you know. It's great.
At the end of the movie, she includes Jen of being poison too. Like the most poisonous thing is a teenage girl or whatever she says.
Yeah, she says something like an 8-year-old full of deceit.
Oh,
or
8-year-old.
Yeah.
8-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, as though she wasn't the adult in this scenario and hiding a lifetime's worth of evil secrets.
Yeah, but what's I think but what's interesting about that is the thing that Jen is kind like, okay, Jen conceals this from her ostensibly to protect her feelings that she is advancing in the training because she could read and Jade Fox can't read, but also she could have, shown her, some, so.
Well, think about the inversion of that too, where she surpasses her master and it kind of throws her into chaos. There's something to that. She doesn't just surpass her master. When you think about it, she sort of surpasses everyone in her life that could possibly give her any guidance at all. Her family surpassed. Her social station surpassed. Her master who's teaching her secret kung fu surpassed. Like, you kind of get where she comes from whenever she's like, I don't know what I want. Nobody ever gave me freedom, I guess. I want to be a kung fu girl like I read about.
The other aspect to it, though, is she's kind of spoiled because she's like the whole reason she knows how to read is because she's from the upper class, and many times in the movie she reminds people like number one, Julianne is the first to sort of point out the difference of class between them, but then when she's talking to Dark Cloud, she says to him like I'm a real Manchu or something, right? And this is Qing Dynasty, so she's saying to him, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding, like I'm not a Han like you. I'm a I'm like part of the real ruling class, right? Is that
I think that's right. Yeah, she's like ancient nobility kind of thing.
Well, the Manchus are the ones who started that. They conquered China, and that's why they all have the that haircut like that, because that was imposed on them by the Manchus. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's a little bit interesting that, you know, like when we see her in the martial world, she's really just causing this path of destruction. Do you know what I mean? Like the first taste she gets of the freedom that she wants, she becomes kind of like a martial bully more than anything else.
Well, and my favorite comedy beat in this whole movie is whenever Li Mubai is interviewing all these guys whose asses she kicked, and they're like filing grievances like they're part of a union. They're like, "Hey, this was very rude." I loved that much.
But what's funny about that is Julianne says earlier in the movie, we have rules. Like there are rules that we're supposed to follow. And also I like the line in that when one of the guys says, "Oh, I'm Gua something or whatever," and she's like, "That name, I hate that name more than anything. I hate that name." And then we see him; he's got like a neck brace on. He's like more battered than anybody else. And he's like, "Why did she keep accusing me of being?" Well, I don't understand. Like, oh, that's her husband. And everybody's like, we get it now.
That did feel a little like a Jade Raksha callback, though, where she's trying to kill everyone with that last name.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
this movie is so good.
and
that scene does not make sense if you don't know anything about wuxia. I will say I was baffled by that scene the first time I saw this.
Yeah.
This time I was like, I know exactly why they're doing this. It was so funny. Oh, God, it's a brilliant scene.
The other thing, I mean, we're running out of time, but one thing I wanted to talk about is the atmosphere of the movie, which I think is different than a lot of other wuxia movies as well. I mean, most wuxia movies have atmosphere, but this one has like a particular type of atmosphere. In an odd way, it reminds me of, I forget who did the soundtrack for this one. I want to make sure we give credit. I used to have the soundtrack too, so
it's a really good soundtrack too, by the way.
I think I know who it is. I just don't want to say it wrong. It's Tandoon. So, but it reminds me a lot, since I know, Joel, you've been watching the Hamlets, of the
Hamlets.
What was it, 1990 Hamlet with the Ennio Morricone soundtrack, the one with Mel Gibson, and it's like a Zeffirelli movie.
I really do like Ennio Morricone too.
Yeah. But that period of Ennio Morricone's music, even if you go up to Wolf and stuff like that, he had this style that enveloped you with the strings and, just sort of made you feel like you were there, but you were also drugged and in a dream state. And I feel like this movie has a lot of that sort of sound.
There's a very dreamy atmosphere to this movie. I think the soundtrack does contribute to that significantly. Yeah.
And I think that kind of connects to the whole thing you were talking about of the way that the movement is in the movie, how it's very languid and.
Well, it's I think I was talking about it before the podcast about it being dreamlike. This is the most dreamlike wire fu I've ever seen. Because in a dream, sometimes you'll like jump or fly or whatever. You kind of move like this, where your brain doesn't know how that's supposed to work, so it just kind of inserts what it thinks it would be like, and it's very unreal. It's uncanny is the term I used. I think uncanny is the right way to characterize it too, because there's something almost frightening about the wire fu. It's casual in that it kind of will come out of nowhere and just happen, and then no one comments on it. And the way they move is just so unreal. It actually was unnerving me because I watched this late at night whenever I watched it, and I was like, that's eerie. If this was happening in a horror movie, I would be scared because there's no sound associated with it. There's no like swoosh or boing or zing. There's no action lines here. It's all just like this. They're like lifted up by some unknowable force, and then they're out of the frame and gone. And it's almost shot like a horror movie. It's really weird.
We only have a few minutes, but I want to know what you guys think of the ending, because that's always the one that people.
Oh, the leaping off the mountain ending.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my feeling is twofold. The actual way I think you're supposed to interpret that is kind of symbolically, that she's kind of severing all of her ties with her previous life. And there's something, she's not literally committing suicide, but she is kind of concretely
the old Jen's going to be gone after that. It's
right. She's a totally different person.
What was she, sword goddess or whatever she was calling herself?
Yeah. A sadder but a wiser woman or whatever. To be truly free also means to kind of die to your previous life. So I think that's how you're supposed to interpret it. But the way my heart interprets it is that is the high-flying sequel bait, We're going to get her
Okay.
soaring into heaven and battling the celestial bureaucracy next movie. Count on it, believers.
There is a sequel. What happened in the sequel? Did they bring Jen back or no? I can't.
Please have her fall in love with the Monkey King. This, come on, man. Make my
We
wildest
covered
dreams
it on the podcast too.
flying
I've
sword
never seen the
Icarus would be
sequel.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's a very different movie. It's a very different movie.
I
Yeah.
hope that
Did you
Shanta
like it? I guess is the
so.
question.
I did, but a lot of people did not. And
Yeah, I've
it's
heard
not-
negative stuff. That's
Yeah.
why I've never been tempted
I-
to watch it. But if you liked it, I'll give it a look. I'm
Well, I
curious.
liked it mostly for the fight choreography, and I also liked
Okay.
it because it's got like a lot of the wuxia stuff in it. Like you could watch it and get like inspired for a game, that kind of thing. It's not done at the high level that Crouching Tiger, like Crouching Tiger, has a lot of gloss on it. But that movie
You
didn't.
found it was a solid wuxia movie. Is basically
was-
what you're saying.
It was. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't remember if they
Yeah.
if they
looks
tell
pretty
you what
goofy.
happened. Yeah, it's the
I-
one thing you'd want to know too. So
Sword of
yeah.
Destiny. Yeah, well, this
The,
looks like if you gave the dumbest action directors of the Western world like this material and said, okay, just do this.
no,
This
you. I
feels
think,
like this
I
what
think
they
Yuan Wu Ping directed it. I believe.
Basically,
It
you know,
looks
on
pretty
your
goofy.
question though about the ending, it's I mean, really, you have the last scene she has with God, I'm blanking on names here. With Julianne is Julianne telling her it's like just be who you are, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels like the expression of that she's just like, yeah, I've been kind of chasing
Yeah.
these different dreams, but I don't want any of these dreams. It's like the being part of the Jianghu, the going off with Dark Cloud, having Li Mu Bai as a master. It's like it's like, nah, I don't know. It's 'cause that's the question though. It's like, is it because she found what she wants to be, or is it just she's realized she's dissatisfied with everything? I can see a positive
Yeah.
and negative reading of it. Like a weird thing, like, I don't know, there's a Kafka story, The Hunger Artist, where it's this guy who goes on hunger strikes as part of a sideshow, and it's a sideshow. How many days can he go without eating? And at the end, he eventually starves himself to death. And the final line is like him telling some, like, what was your secret to this? It's like, oh, I just never found a food I liked. It's like, that would be the negative reading of that scene. It's like, did she just realize she just is utterly dissatisfied, or has she found herself? I can
Yeah,
read it either way.
Is
I
she
tend to
lost or
take that-
found? I love that.
I tend to
Yeah.
take the symbolic meaning of it, where she is, just she's not going to die. She's going to just go and be in the martial world, and she'll be living under another name. And
Uh-huh.
Dark Cloud is going to be left to his own devices where he is.
He'll be fine.
He'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's going to be a student of Wudang, so like, there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I do have to head out, so we'll have to end it here. Which unfortunately we didn't get to every point we wanted to, but we covered.
This
a lot.
This is a big movie. You could talk about it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we'll head out, and until next time, we will talk to you later.